this video, I'm going to show you how to learn a lot faster and better. Stay tuned. Hi, it's Tansel, 4-time Australian memory champion, helping you learn faster and better. If you're into personal development, please subscribe to the channel and we'll get more of these videos out there. And if you like the video, if you think it's helpful, click like. Now, a lot of people, when they try and get into memory first, what they do is they read a few books and try a few exercises, learn the techniques, use them, and then what they find is that they find it really difficult to apply in everyday situations. So what do I mean by that? Take, for example, the location method, memory palace, journey system, whatever you want to call it. Now, when people learn that, they learn the basics of it, but when they go to apply that technique, they realize that it's not that practical. You're probably thinking, well, how do I use it? It's sort of used in a way where it's not that practical. I'll give you an example. I received an email one day from this dude, and he emailed me about using the Memory Palace for studying his MBA. Now, at the time, I thought, this is ridiculous, right? Why would anyone want to use the Memory Palace just for your studies? And I'll go through why you shouldn't just use memory techniques for your studies, because there's a whole lot going on in terms of learning, memorization, and so on. So we want to go through and make sure, well, what does effective learning look like? A lot of people think that memorization is the key to better learning and studying. Well, it's not. Memorization, believe it or not, should be the last thing on your mind. It should be the last thing that you do. What you want to be able to do is you want to be able to put forward all your efforts and focus and concentration into learning, not memorization. Learning is different, memorization is different. So you're probably going, Tansel, how do I do that? Well, I'm glad you asked. So I'm going to go through some scenarios for you, and just so you can understand how this process works, because once you understand how memory and learning work together, then you'll be able to go out there and tackle whatever you want to learn. Probably 90% of the things that you want to learn anyway. So maybe not for gardening or things like that, who knows, but if it's information based, this stuff will work for you. So here we go. Now, if I laid out a whole bunch of dots, right, for you, and without obviously counting the dots in this video, how many dots would there be? Now, if you could see those dots, if you can't, it doesn't matter. But I just drew a whole bunch of dots. And if I said to you, well, how many dots there are, you might guess, you might estimate how many dots there are, right? But if I wrote down the dots in order, so if I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 down, then just by looking at the top and side rows, you'll see that, oh yeah, there's 70 there. So your brain just automatically calculates it. And that's what information is. Information given to us it's unstructured. It's like a whole bunch of dots everywhere. Even though we think that things are in linear format, it's flowing, it's not, right? Take a book, for example. If you look at the back, it's got like a glossary, index, all that sort of stuff, and it's got a particular topic. You might say memory, right? And memory is page 12, page 13, page 27, 300, and they're all on different pages, the reference to that particular item. Now, what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to go to that particular topic and see all the relevant links to it at once, instead of going to one page and another page and another page. If you want to learn a lot better, you have to have direct access to the information, and something like mind mapping gives you direct access because everything is on one branch. And I'll make a separate video on mind mapping another time, because that's just another whole ball game together. But if you're using strategies like mind mapping, it's a lot more powerful than just memorizing. Now, what do you do when you want to learn a lot better and not use memorization? There are 4 different stages that you essentially go through. And the first stage is you're going to look at all the information in front of you, right? Whether it's books, articles, PowerPoint slides, PDFs, articles online, articles in print form, whatever it is, you're going to have information. So the first thing to do is not to go and try and read and memorize and learn that information straight away. Because what you're doing is the brain is trying to encode and process that information as you're going through it. Now, what does that do? that tires your brain out. What happens after that is if your brain is tired and you've got all this other work to do, then all this work, just thinking of it, overwhelms you and you stop doing it. Now, if you're watching this and going, yeah, that happens to me, well then this video is for you. So keep watching till the end. The trick is to be able to go through all your work and then go back and learn it, and then go back and look at the connections between everything, so solidify the learning. And then the final part is memorize what you need to memorize, right? So memorization comes last in the learning process, not first, not second, not even third, but last. And the reason for that is it requires the most processing, right? If you've got an old computer, you know how the fans kick in, it gets really loud and noisy, or if it's a gaming computer, same sort of thing here. The fans kick in our head and it just starts winding us up, right? We don't want to be wound up. So what we want is we want to go nice, seamless process for learning. So the first part, right, number one, is what I call organizing information, right? I'll write in American because there's a lot of US viewers here. So organize the information. Now, how do you organize that information, you ask, right? I mentioned mind mapping before. You can use mind mapping because what mind mapping does, like I said, is let's say you take a central topic and you've got a branch here, you've got another branch here. I'm not going to go through, like I said, the whole fundamentals of mind mapping. I'll just show you the basics of it. If you've got a particular topic here, let's say that's on memory, then everything related to memory will be in this branch, right? Now that's great. Why? Because as soon as someone says memory, or you need to connect onto any little themes or ideas or topics underneath memory, they're all under there. So that's why mind mapping is really helpful. So number one, organize the information. Organization could also be if you're using post-it notes or creating color schemes or whatever you love doing, or if you're using any software. I mean, I use a lot of mind mapping software, but you can use things like Evernote or OneNote, whatever it is that helps you organize those notes. That's the best thing to do first. And the reason why that is that, like I said, you're being flooded with information. So the best thing to do is organize that information first. First thing to do is organize that information. The second thing to do is once that information is organized, let's say you take the mind mapping route. What you can do is when you mind map, you go through and you add any elements onto that mind map. So I'll give you an example. If you're wanting to study from a book or learn from a book, you can mind map the book. And the easy way to do that is put the chapter headings in each branch, right? And I know I'm not going through mind mapping a whole lot in this, but bear with me. If you haven't done mind mapping before, like I said, I'll do a separate video on that. But for now, you can organize everything on the mind map. And like I said, even a book, so you put your chapter headings, and then you put your subheadings underneath that, sub-subheadings, so you create a skeleton of the book. And this doesn't even require much effort, to be honest. It doesn't require much effort. And what you're doing is that you're just laying out all the bits and pieces of information that are scattered everywhere, and you're putting them on and organizing them in a way that when you do step back and look at it, it's going to show you where all the bits of information from what you're studying are organized in. And why is that powerful? Like I said, direct access to that topic. Number one is organize. You organize the information, whether it's mind mapping or any other tools that you've got. And then number two is looking at all the connections that you've mind mapped. So you've got your mind map there. You've put in the headings, subheadings, sub-subheadings, maybe even some keywords underneath them. And then what you have to do then is you have to obviously go through and start reading those materials. You can't just put the skeleton in, right? And often I talk about speed reading to people. So when you're speed reading, you can add the content in here. But let's just say you don't know speed reading. What you're doing is once you've mapped out a whole book, then you can put some more content underneath there. So for example, if you're talking about memory and a certain memory technique, and it might be memory palace, well, how does a memory palace work? What does it look like? How can you create one, right? They're the kind of stuff that you put in there because that's the detail. So we're adding the detail of what we read. So the mind map gets bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Or your notes get a little bit bigger, but it's all structured and organized now rather than just being all over the place. So you got everything memory related there, everything maybe speed reading there, and so on. Number one is organize the information. Number two is add further details. So I'll just write add details. Add details on top of the mind map. Or you can add further details. Like I said, if you're writing in a linear form, it could be Evernote, could be Notion. I use Notion a lot, so I'll do a video on that. We've got those three elements. And again, going back to number 2, the reason why you want to do number 2 is you want to start putting the meat on the skeleton. And if you've got the meat on the skeleton, then what happens, what you can do, which is the third step, is you can visualize. Again, I'll put the Z for American spelling. So visualize. You want to visualize your mind map. You want to visualize going through the content. You can visualize, like I said, your linear list. You can visualize your content in branches. Now, how do you visualize? Well, you look at the main topic. Let's say this was memory. Now say, okay, memory's got techniques, it's got principles, it's got, maybe other memorizers, and so on. So I just go through and try and see what can I see in this particular topic that I can really stretch out, imagine, maybe even use emotions. Like, it's got memory palace. Well, what does a palace look like in my head? How can I get a vision of that? And as soon as you start visualizing everything, what it's doing is it's slowly encoding the bits of data that you've put in there. And the reason why encoding is powerful is that that's what helps us to remember, not just writing or reading words, because if we're just doing that, we're just reading abstract information, which doesn't necessarily register in our head. So we need to encode. So visualizing helps us to encode and also learn the information. It's in the visualization process that you learn. That's where comprehension improvement happens, when we're visualizing. Speed reading, all that is just encoding a group of words together. That's all it is. And the way to do that is through visualization. So if you read visually, you're at an advantage. If you're just reading a whole bunch of words, that's not going to help you to remember. So you have to visualize and encode. That's the step 3. And the final one, if you can remember, is memorize. Well, I'm not even going to write that down. So memorize. And how you're going to memorize, and this is really cool, is that once you've laid out everything, then you know what you need to memorize. If you start from memorization first, well, how do you know what to memorize? You might look at it and go, oh yeah, this part looks important, or this particular paragraph, or these lists of things, yeah, I can go by and try and memorize. But what you're doing, you have to lay the foundation first, see what you're dealing with information-wise, and then go back and say, oh, really, I've got that part to memorize, I've got this part here, that part. And what the mind map will do is that it'll show you the things that you need to memorize, and more importantly, how less of things you really have to memorize. Because students think, and people studying for professional exams think that they've got a lot of memorizing to do, right? Even I work with a lot of medical students and law students. They think they've got a lot of memorizing to do, whereas when I work with them, it's mostly the visualization stuff that we're doing. And the reason why we're doing that is so they can understand what's going on. The visualization helps with the understanding, and that's crucial, because you can memorize and still not understand. I'll say that again. You can memorize but still not understand. Our goal is to learn. So visualize, learn, memorize for retention. Here's the thing. If I said to you what's under memory, you might have a faint idea what's under there. So the things that you don't remember, that's when you might kick the memory techniques into gear, right? That's when you might memorize something. So that's when that essentially comes in. When you need to use memory techniques is when you really need it. And you'd be surprised of how much you actually learn just by mind mapping things, right? It's really, really powerful, because it not only creates a structure for you, it actually helps you to memorize bits. Because let's say you read something that's 50 pages. Well, if you mind map it, it might just be 4 branches, right? I used to go into all my lectures when I was studying my MBA, and I used to create A3 pieces of paper with mind maps on them, because the PowerPoint slides given to us by the lecturer was really crap. They were really crap. I reconstructed everything and I made them into mind maps, and 50 PowerPoint slides came out to about 3 branches on a mind map. And those 3 branches, obviously I had sub-branches, but then when my colleagues and even the lecturer used to see these mind maps, they used to go, oh, that's all we're doing. This is really easy to learn, easy to teach. A lot of the trainers that I used to work with, I used to give them mind maps. I used to say, here, mind map your lessons, lesson plans. Fantastic, because it's easier to see where the information is going. 4 steps. Organize, add details onto your organized bit of information, so add the meat. Visualize what you've put on there, because there's no use trying to learn if you don't visualize it. It's just like looking at a whole bunch of notes and going, oh, yep, I don't get it. Right? You need to visualize the whole content as you're going through it. And then finally, memorize. So memorize what you need to memorize. You don't have to memorize everything. Otherwise, you'll be counterproductive in your learning. This is probably the first time I'm doing these lesson type videos, but let me know in the comments if you do like these sort of videos. Otherwise, I'm happy to just talk and give some tips. I love workshops, so I used to run a whole bunch of them, but I stopped doing them for some reason. I'm happy to do more of these videos because it's important to know how to learn. And one of the things that used to get me was I just didn't have a process to learning, so it was always a struggle. But now, once you follow this process, it's so easy. Like I said, I get a lot of people contacting me for coaching, and one of the things is I've got all this information to learn. What do? How do I use memory techniques? So that's how people are coming to me, by memory techniques. I'll say, no, you don't need memory techniques. You need a learning strategy. So this is a framework, it's a strategy, and memory is only a final addition to that. So think about that. Okay, so that's it for today. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you did, please click the like button, as it really helps the YouTube algorithm and people can find this sort of stuff and benefit from it. Also, make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.